You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello and welcome along to the latest Today's Family Lawyer podcast. I'm delighted today to be joined by Helen Young. Helen heads up the family team at Debenhams Ottaway and has specialised in family law for just under 30 years, so she tells me. Today we're going to be talking about a tricky topic, I think it's fair to say. We're going to be talking about ethics, family law ethics, why they're important, particularly in family. So thank you very much indeed for joining the podcast.
No, thank you, David. So yes, it's quite true. I have been specialising in family law for just under 30 years, and I've been qualified for just over 30 years. So I started off in high street general practice down in London back in the late 80s, and then moved around various places, did a sort of couple of years stint at the London Borough of Brent doing public law children's services work, but primarily my focus has been private client, all aspects of family law, primarily for me, financial matters, but the whole range, Children Act proceedings, and also, prenups, postnups. So the usual range that you would expect from a family lawyer.
Listeners to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast will also be able to listen to a recent podcast we've done with a colleague of yours around the good divorce. And one of the things that really came out of that discussion was that there's a choice to be made when you're working in family law, which is what ethics you hold yourself to, what standards you hold yourself to as a lawyer when you're dealing with particularly difficult situations. Ethics just feel so very important in family, don't they?
Yeah, I think they run through everything that we do. We have a code of conduct through the SRA. A lot of us are members of Resolution, which is a nationwide family law association. Again, we have a code of practice through that. Clients who come with family law issues are very often very emotional, upset, anxious. It's not the same as doing, a commercial property transaction or anything like that. So we have that whole emotional range to deal with, as well as the legal advice. So I think it's extremely important that we are all invested in adhering to the codes of practice, because I think it's probably one of the most important areas of law where ethical standards have to be upheld.
It's a delight to have you on the podcast, not just because of your experience, but also you're head of the team at Debenhams Ottaway. How important is it that as a leader in a family law team, you're setting that example?
Oh, it's absolutely crucial. I think when you're recruiting people for the team, yes, you want them to be technically excellent, but also you want them to fit in with your ethos and ideals. So we have recruited actually quite recently. So I've been going through that process both at junior and senior levels. And one of the most important things for me in terms of bringing new people to the team is that they share our ideals. And I think that we are known for being, a transparent, a real, a down-to-earth firm that acts with integrity. And I think that helps not only for clients, but also in terms of the attraction of talent. You get a reputation for it, and people want to come and work here. So I think it feeds into everything that you do.
How do you identify people that aren't on board with your ethics?
Well, look, it's difficult from the outset. When you meet people in interviews, no matter how much you dig, you might get the odd person that you're just wrong about. But generally, we have a set of questions that will test people's way of thinking and their approach to clients, so that you're as sure as you can be that you've got the right people on board. And I'm extremely pleased to say that at the moment, I am just it is a pleasure to come to work and manage my team at the moment, because we just have such a great blend of both, lawyers, support staff. I've done something right, which is great.
Thinking about the recruitment piece, and you're suggesting you've recruited at sort of quite senior and quite junior levels, do you see a generational difference between a more experienced recruit as opposed to a younger, perhaps fresher out of law school recruit, in terms of that ethical divide again?
I suppose if you're recruiting somebody who's more experienced, then they will have learned things in the other places that they have been. And some of them may not be great, and some of them may be great. So it really depends on the individual. What I am finding with the younger people that are coming through is that they're just so committed and so enthusiastic. And I just find it such a breath of fresh air, because they all seem to be completely on board with what we want to achieve, which isn't to be the biggest money-making, organisation. That's not what we're about. We want to help people. We also want to help our other colleagues in other teams by helping their clients, because we have a lot of cross-referral work right across the board. And it really helps that my colleagues here know that we do a really good job. And if they've got any clients, corporate clients, anybody at all, then we're going to offer them the same level of service.
It's interesting to hear your thoughts on younger lawyers, because there's plenty of research out there that shows that millennials actually want purpose in their job. It's not enough for them to come in and do the drudgery. Actually, they really want to have something really worthwhile to go to work for. That feels as though it lends itself to this ethics discussion as well, that actually they're coming into this with a real purpose in mind.
I think that's absolutely right, David. We certainly have found that with the younger people that are coming through. They genuinely want to be doing work that has purpose and value. And so our challenge as an employer is to make sure that we can provide that to them. So when you get a new, young, super enthusiastic person coming in, you want to make sure that you've got the right caliber of work to make them happy. Also to have, a career progression path for them to be able to follow if they want to. And a lot of the young people are very interested in being able to know what they can achieve, what's the time scale for that. So as I say, I think our challenge as an employer is then to ensure that we give them the best structured background with the best caliber of work that allows us both to succeed. Because if we can give them the work that they are looking for, they're going to be productive. And so then it works for both sides.
There is, in family, by the nature of the billable hour, this challenge, isn't there, between the fact that on the one hand, the less work you have to do, the easier the job is, actually the less you get paid, as opposed to the more work there is, obviously there's more to bill there. How do you balance that on a commercial level? Again, because you're head of the department, you've got targets to hit. How do you balance that commercially alongside the ethical discussions that we're having?
Well, I always ask my team to act in the client's best interests. Now, you're quite right. If we're working towards getting a client a good settlement, but we're trying to negotiate that, and we're trying not to go into the court process, and we're looking at perhaps alternatives such as mediation, etc., then we're not going to make as much money out of that case as we would if we went into, for example, contested financial proceedings, because we know that if we do that, we've got 2 or 3 hearings, perhaps going out into private FDR or arbitration mode, and you'll make a lot more money out of those cases than you would if I send my client off to go and mediate. But I think it's really important that we do what is best for the client. That gives you the reputation of doing what is best for them. And then that therefore attracts other clients. So, the vast majority of our work comes in through clients we've acted for or professionals that we know and who will be confident to refer their clients to us. And I'm thinking about, accountants, IFAs, that sort of thing. So I think, in a nutshell, what I'm saying, what goes around comes around. And, I don't want to change that.
Do you get heavily involved in the marketing of the department then, or do you sort of feel very involved in that process?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a great team here. We have people who, help us on all levels. It is important for our message to be heard and for that message to be put out in the right way. So I'm always happy to get involved in any initiatives that, help my team and help my firm as a whole, really.
Is it safe to say, in your view then, that families in a really good place at the moment? Because anecdotally, what the law schools are telling me is that there's a lot of young lawyers coming out wanting to go into family. Actually, it's a very popular area to specialize in at the moment. Is family in a really good place from that point of view?
We've not had any problems in sort of recruiting at junior level. I do know anecdotally that some of the younger people, have had to spend some time perhaps looking for training contracts and that sort of thing. We do a great thing here, which is we assist with the local university who run like a pro bono family law clinic. So in fact, one of our new trainees was actually on one of the sessions that I helped with for the law clinic. So, we get to know people when they're still studying, which actually is something that has been really quite useful. I think in terms of family law generally, whilst we are in a good place, we are experiencing some difficulties across the board, really, with court timings and so on. I issued a financial application a couple of weeks ago, first appointment next August.
Wow.
And it's supposed to be within 14 to 16 weeks of issue. So that's a real problem. We always see if we can negotiate out of court. That is our starting point. But if we have to go there, one of the major problems is around, court resources and availability.
That feels like a whole other podcast, so we're not going to go there. We're not going to go there today. But think about this ethical discussion we're having. There is a very traditional view, particularly in family law, that lawyers will string out cases to, as we've discussed, to ensure that they're billing the maximum amount of time that they can. Is that something that you're still seeing? Is that something that's changing? Is that a mentality that's changing?
It is still something that we see, sadly, but I would hope that we continue to work together to change that. I'm afraid that I find that whilst some solicitors might say they're part of resolution and they follow the code of practice and the SRA code of conduct, sometimes it doesn't quite feel that way. So just an example, we encourage clients to mediate if we think that it's appropriate. Now, I could make more money out of that case if we dealt with financial disclosure through solicitors, because I'd be involved in the preparation of the Form E and all of the collation of the documents and so on, and that would take more time and I would charge for it. So actually, by sending a client to mediation, I'm reducing the fees that I will ultimately make, but I'm doing it because I genuinely think that they can probably work better with their other half in the room. And there may be issues around, the arrangements for the children and how they're going to share care of the children and that sort of thing. So in appropriate cases, I'll do exactly that.
Is there an argument to say that family lawyers can increase their fees then? So you may well be doing slightly less work, but actually the work that you're doing is more valuable.
Well, I suppose it's dealing directly with the legal issues that the client needs to have addressed. So the client doesn't need me or my support staff to collate their bank statements, as wonderful a task as it is. So yes, we are adding value in that way, because what we're saying is, maybe go and have a look at mediation, see where you get to in that process. It's cheaper for you both to share the mediation fees that it is to pay 2 solicitors to do that work, but we'll still see all of the information once it's there and advise. So you're not going to miss out on the important issues that we will bring to you and make sure that you're addressing.
If there's an ethical line when it comes to the way in which we deliver the law, I think there's also an ethical line in the way that law firms promote themselves as well. And I'm thinking very specifically about Divorce Day in January. Is it right? Is it fair? Is it ethical that law firms promote their services in that way, especially considering that for so many, law is a distress purchase?
Well, it'll come as no surprise to you to learn that I don't like all of the hype and the advertising that there is around D-Day. I think it's unhelpful. And I also think that to some way it sort of reduces the way in which we're perceived by others. I think
It's
that,
almost ambulance chasing.
yeah, I mean, when somebody comes to me, they may have spent months and years plucking up the courage to actually access some legal advice. So I just don't like all of the hype. I think that it can be counterproductive. I don't know if you remember, years ago, there was that firm that had those adverts, I think in sort of ladies and gents loos in bars in London. Was it ditch the bitch or something like that was the slogan, was one of the slogans that they were using. Now, that's kind of funny to some degree, but actually when you think about it, ethically, it's just not good at all. And I don't like things that will ultimately devalue the really important work that we do.
I think one of the big ethical challenges for lawyers is it's all very well and good giving our advice based on our own ethics and our own consideration. There are plenty of times when our clients don't take that advice. How do we deal with it? How do you make sure that you're still striking that right ethical line?
It can be a challenge. And I mean, it's a challenge that arises in sort of many different areas. I suppose the area that it comes up more usually might be around sort of the financial piece and the financial settlement. So you might get somebody that brings you their financial information and you look at it and it's abundantly clear that something's missing. So even if you're in voluntary disclosure as opposed to in the court process, you're under a duty to provide full and proper information. And so you have to be very clear to your client that they need to provide that information, because you will not negotiate a financial settlement if you believe that the information is not all of there. And certainly when you're in a court process, you're an officer of the court, you're under a duty to the court as well as to your client. So you have to be very clear that in your work, you need them to be truthful and honest with you. I mean, I quite recently, actually, on a couple of matters, have had issues of Immerman documents. So documents that belong to the other party. And of course, we have a very clear procedure about what we're supposed to do in those circumstances. Many years ago, I remember that before the Immerman case, you could pretty much, use information that came to you in a not quite straightforward way. I remember some documents that came out of a client's partner's glove compartment once, but gone are those days. And I just think that we just need to be very clear with our clients in terms of the information they provide and the approach that they take.
I'm going to counter that with, when emotions are involved, ethics go out the window.
Yeah, to some degree. It's that classic, well, if I go to court, I'll get my day in court and the judge will see him for what he is and all of those sorts of things. And I completely get that. If you've been through a totally distressing and emotional time, I get that you might want to have that validation. So, part of our work as family lawyers is to explain that that's not what you're going to end up with in a court process. And often we'll, suggest counselling to clients, in appropriate cases, if there are issues with children and so on, family therapists. So we do try to look at it in a rounded way. And I mean, I have told clients in the past when they've come to see me, I think it's too early for you to be here. I don't think you're in the right space emotionally to be able to deal with it. And often they'll take that advice, they will come back in a few months and they'll just be far more able to deal with things than they were on the first occasion.
Does the removal of the need to assign blame in a divorce case help with the ethical stance?
I think so. I mean, it's only been with us for a very short time, but I definitely think so. I mean, the number of first appointments with clients when you talk about everything, talk about options, and have to explain to them about unreasonable behaviour and adultery, and it just completely sets it off on the wrong foot. So I think if we can take that bit out of the process, it helps everybody. So yes, it was a large hooray from me when it finally came about.
We started out the discussion by saying that ethics is a key part of family. I don't think we've talked about anything that would change our stance on that. It really does boil down in a lot of ways to what kind of lawyer you want to be. And that also is connected to firm culture and to individual culture. So I applaud the stance that you take in your business, Helen, because it's obviously a very ethical stance that you have as a head of department. We're out of time. It's been great to chat. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you, David. It's been my pleasure.
Today's Family Lawyer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on today's familylawyer.co.uk. My thanks to Helen. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.